The air in the upscale Berlin restaurant was thick with the clink of crystal glasses and the murmur of wealth. A black waitress moved silently through the tables, her tray balanced with practiced ease, her eyes scanning the room for the next order. She was invisible to most, a shadow in a starched apron, until a billionaire in a tailored suit leaned back in his chair, his voice slicing through the hum with a calculated edge. His German, crisp and deliberate, carried a venomous undertone, as he mocked her, assuming she couldn't understand. The words were laced with racial scorn, a jab at her heritage, her presence in this polished space. Heads turned, some with smirks, others with discomfort, but none intervened. The waitress paused, her breath catching, not from fear but from a spark of defiance igniting within her. What no one in that room knew, not the billionaire, not the gawking diners, was that her response, poised on the tip of her tongue, would unravel his arrogance in seconds. How could a waitress, dismissed as uneducated, hold the power to turn this moment upside down? The answer lay in her past, a story of resilience and brilliance, and it was about to unfold in a way that would leave the entire restaurant stunned. Her name was Amara, a woman in her late 20s whose life had been a tapestry of struggle and quiet triumphs. Born in Lagos, Nigeria, she'd moved to Germany as a teenager, her family chasing better opportunities after years of hardship. Amara was no stranger to the weight of stereotypes. Her dark skin and African accent often drew assumptions of inferiority in the academic halls and corporate offices of Berlin. Yet she carried a secret pride, a linguistics degree earned through late-night studies and relentless determination. Fluent in German, English, and Yoruba, she'd mastered the language of her new home with a precision that rivaled native speakers. But life wasn't kind to dreamers without connections. Unable to secure a job in her field, she took up waitressing at Der Kronleuchter, a restaurant catering to Berlin's elite, where her skills went unnoticed, buried under the daily grind of serving entitled patrons. The billionaire, Klaus Werner, was a regular, his presence commanding the room like a storm cloud. A real estate tycoon with a reputation for ruthlessness, he thrived on control, his wealth a shield for his prejudices. That evening, he sat with a group of investors, his laughter loud, his gestures expansive. Amara had served his table before, enduring his dismissive glances and curt orders. But tonight was different. As she approached with a tray of wine, Klaus's eyes locked onto her, a smirk curling his lips. He saw an opportunity to assert his dominance, to entertain his guests with a cruel jest. The room, with its polished wood and glittering chandeliers, became a stage for his arrogance, and Amara, unwittingly, its target. Curiosity hung in the air. What had she done to provoke him, and what would she do next? Amara's early years in Nigeria were vivid in her memory, a collage of bustling markets and her mother's stories of resilience. Her parents, both teachers, instilled in her a hunger for knowledge, but their modest means couldn't shield them from systemic barriers. When her father secured a visa to Germany, it felt like a lifeline. Yet the reality of integration was harsh. In Berlin, Amara faced whispers and stares, her accent dissected, her intelligence questioned. She excelled in school, her German flawless by her final year, but university brought new challenges. Classmates assumed she was there on charity. Professors overlooked her raised hand. Still, she graduated with honors, her thesis on linguistic prejudice earning quiet acclaim. But the job market was a locked door. Recruiters saw her name, her face, and dismissed her before she could speak. Waitressing was a means to survive, not a choice. Der Kronleuchter's opulence contrasted sharply with Amara's reality. Long shifts, aching feet, and patrons who rarely met her eyes. Klaus Werner was the worst of them. His wealth, built on gentrifying Berlin's working-class neighborhoods, came with a sense of entitlement that spilled into every interaction. He'd made passing comments before, snide remarks about foreigners taking jobs, But tonight his words were sharper, more deliberate. As Amara set down the wine, he leaned toward his guests, his voice loud enough to carry. In German, he sneered about her place in the restaurant, implying her race made her unfit for anything but servitude. The words weren't just an insult. They were a calculated performance meant to degrade her while amusing his table. The restaurant's hum faltered. Waiters froze. Diners glanced over, some with pity, others with amusement. Amara's pulse quickened, not from shame, but from a growing resolve. She'd heard worse, endured worse, but this moment felt different. Klaus's assumption, that she couldn't understand that she was less, mirrored every rejection she'd faced. Her mind raced through years of microaggressions. The professor who assumed she'd plagiarized her perfect German essay, the recruiter who mispronounced her name, with a smirk. Each memory fueled her, a fire building beneath her calm exterior. She could walk away, let the moment pass, keep her job safe, but something in Klaus's smug grin in the silence of the room demanded more. Her fluency, her intellect, her very existence were weapons she'd honed for years. The tension in the air thickened. What would she do with them? Amara stood still for a heartbeat, the tray empty in her hands, the weight of every eye in the restaurant pressing against her. Klaus's laughter echoed, his guests chuckling, emboldened by his audacity. The words he'd spoken hung like a noose, their racial undertones unmistakable. He'd assumed her ignorance, her inability to comprehend his German, as if her blackness and her apron stripped her of intellect. But Amara's mind was a storm of clarity. She set the tray down, her movements deliberate, and turned to face him. The room seemed to contract, the chandelier's glow sharpening the moment. In flawless German, her voice steady but laced with steel, she began. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. Her words cut through the air, each syllable a rebuke to his arrogance. She spoke of her journey, her education, her mastery of his language, her roots in a culture richer than his wealth could ever buy. She dismantled his assumptions, exposing the bigotry woven into his insult. She described the history of his company's developments, how they'd displaced communities like hers, profiting off the marginalized he so casually scorned. Her eloquence was a blade, precise and unrelenting, slicing through his veneer of superiority. Klaus's smirk vanished. His face reddened, his eyes darting to his guests, who now sat rigid, their amusement replaced by unease. The other diners, once spectators, were now witnesses to his unraveling. Amara's voice never wavered, her fluency a mirror reflecting his ignorance back at him. She didn't yell, didn't gesture wildly. Her calm was her power, her intellect her weapon. The restaurant was silent, save for her words, each one landing like a stone in still water, rippling through the room. Klaus tried to interject, his voice faltering, but Amara's presence overwhelmed him. She'd turned his stage into hers, his cruelty into her triumph. The moment was electric, the air charged with the weight of justice unfolding. The silence that followed was deafening. Klaus slumped in his chair, his authority diminished, a man exposed not by wealth or power but by his own prejudice. Amara stepped back, her breath steady, her eyes meeting his one last time before she returned to her work. The restaurant slowly stirred, whispers spreading like wildfire. Diners who'd smirked now looked away, ashamed. Others, inspired, watched, her with newfound respect. The manager, who'd hovered nervously, said nothing. Amara's performance had rendered discipline impossible. Klaus and his guests left soon after, their meal unfinished, his reputation tarnished in the eyes of those who mattered to him. Word of the encounter spread beyond the restaurant. A diner had recorded it, the video slipping onto social media, where it gained traction. Amara's poise, her intellect, her unflinching courage became a beacon. Local blogs picked up the story, framing it as a moment of reckoning for Berlin's elite. Amara didn't seek the attention, but it found her. Offers came. Job interviews, speaking engagements, even a scholarship to pursue a master's degree. She accepted a role at a cultural institute where her linguistic skills and lived experience shaped programs on diversity and inclusion. Her story, rooted in a real moment of racial injustice, inspired others to speak out, to challenge the assumptions that silenced them. Klaus faced no legal consequences. Wealth often shielded such men, but his social capital eroded. His investors distanced themselves, his name whispered in boardrooms as a cautionary tale. The restaurant, too, changed, its staff empowered to call out prejudice, its culture subtly shifting. Amara's life moved forward, not without struggle, but with a clarity of purpose. She'd turned a moment of humiliation into a legacy of defiance, proving that resilience could outshine arrogance. What does it mean to assume someone's worth based on their skin, their job, their accent? How many Amaras walk among us, their brilliance unseen until they choose to reveal it? Her story lingers, a reminder that prejudice thrives in ignorance, but a single voice, armed with truth, can shatter it. What will you do the next time you witness injustice? Stay silent or speak?